Asham curling shoes are the best we've ever used.
Oh,
Right here.
oh, there he is.
He's hiding.
Sorry. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you as well. Thanks for having
All
me
right.
on.
Oh, our pleasure.
Is the screen big enough for you guys, for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Looks good. I guess we'll get started then, because I see the recording has started. So welcome everybody to session 4, Technical Delivery Skill Review and Analysis with Connie Lalibertie and Rob Gordon, brought to you by, if you may have guessed, Asham Curling, the most recognized name in curling. Asham is a leader in innovative curling equipment design and a loyal ambassador of our great support. Curl your best in Asham. Asham has generously donated a $100 gift certificate that will be awarded at the end of the session to one lucky attendee. Just some housekeeping. Please make sure that you stick around for after the session. There will be a quick poll on a few questions that we need your input on for tonight and for tomorrow. So please stick around for that poll. Now for our speakers, Connie Lalibertie is a 3-time Canadian women's curling champion, as well as world curling champion. Since retiring from competitive curling in 2002, Connie has been Curl Manitoba's high performance director. In this position, Connie has been able to work with athletes and coaches at various levels. Her philosophy is, in life, you get out of it what you put into it. Makes a lot of sense. Rob Gordon has been curling competitively since 2009 and became competition coach certified this year. As a curler, he has competed in numerous national championships and Grand Slam curling events, and in 2016 won junior curling bronze medal representing Canada. Rob currently works as event and development assistant for Curl Manitoba and has instructed at various programs over the years, such as Camp Carruthers, Curl Manitoba Skill Development Series, and Curl Manitoba High Performance Program. So Connie and Rob, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Sabina. So I just want to give you an overview of what this session's all about. So Rob and I are first going to talk about the tuck delivery, a little bit of history and how it created. Then we're going to provide an analysis of the tuck delivery in the 4 phases of the delivery. Then we're going to discuss the similarities and differences between the tuck and the flat foot delivery in the 4 delivery phases. And we're going to review the key fundamentals of each stage. Then we're going to discuss variations of the tuck delivery. And after that, we'll talk about the hybrid delivery, which is a combination of the flat foot and the tuck. And then we'll finish off with analyzing some videos of the tuck deliveries and showing you some photos as well at the end. So that'll be the whole presentation. So to start off, and questions, if you don't mind, we'll hold off to the end. And I know that Sabina will ask me them. If you don't mind, that would be great. There's a lot of information that we're going to be sharing. So, okay, tuck delivery. You know, how the tuck delivery was created was that way back when men curled, they actually wore street shoes. And the street shoes had a leather sole with the heel part being rubber. So for them to slide further, the rubber would prevent them from sliding. So they kept on going up on their toe part, which would make them slide a little further. Plus, I think back then, and I could be wrong on this, but I think your delivery can only stop, it had to stop before the hog line. You couldn't have your delivery past the hog line, if I remember. Anyways, that's the history of how the tuck really developed. And one of the known tuck deliverer back then, years ago, was certainly Barry the Snake Fry, who's a Manitoban, and actually who's Ryan Fry's dad. And he's done very well in the sport of curling as well. And he's known as, his nickname is the Snake because he's got a coiled delivery in behind the stone. Now, we're going to take ownership of the tuck delivery, Manitoba that is, because we have a lot of tuck sliders in our province. It's not going away. So there's no sense in not looking at it and analyzing it and figure out what's how we can help these curlers with their tuck delivery. So we thought we might as well embrace it, find out more about the tuck slide, and and with the analysis of it, and Rob's helped me. I've also had Mike McEwen help me and Jeff Stoughton as well in putting together this presentation. So it's being used, the tuck delivery has been used for the last 50 plus years in Manitoba. Who uses it? We know that we've had champions come through as tuck delivers. Certainly, it's funny when I show this presentation to our young athletes right now, they don't know some of these people in this picture. They don't know Vic Peters on the top left and Carrie Burtnick in the middle of the top as well. But certainly there's Jeff Stoughton on the top right. You've got Mike McEwen bottom left, and of course Ryan Fry in the middle. And then our youngie coming up from Saskatchewan is Matt Dunstone. So we've had a lot of success with the tuck delivery in the international and national competition or events. What is the tuck slide? It's also known as the toe slide. It's delivering the stone while sliding on the ball of the foot. The body stays low in behind the stone. The sliding knee is bent sharply out to the side. Advantages, they say the advantages that is the tuckers are better hitters because of their low, they're like a rifle-like sighting behind the rock, and that they can generate more weight because there's less resistance on drag on the ice. So they're really balance themselves on a small area of the sliding foot. Criticism is that, you know, when we first learned about the tuck delivery, we didn't want to teach it because we felt that it was known out there that it would put excessive weight on the knee or strain on the knee, but that's not necessarily the case actually. There's injuries with flat foot delivers as well as with tuck delivers, and I really think that it depends on your body type and how good of a shape you are. You need strength in those muscles around the knee, and if you do have strong muscles around the knee, then chances are you won't lead to injuries. So it doesn't matter whether you're tuck or flat foot. If you're not in shape, you're probably going to have some sort of injury. Criticism also that we find that the athletes get too low, therefore they don't have a feel for draw weight, because the higher up things go by slower. When you're lower down, everything seems to go by fast. But that's not the case with tuck deliveries, and a lot of times the tuckers actually change their delivery a little bit, come up a little higher for draws, so they can they can perfect the draw. And a good example of that was Jeff Stoughton. I mean, he could draw anytime. Some athletes may not have developed the skill to use the tuck slide without the rock making it more difficult to balance. And what I mean by that is because the tuck delivery, the balance point is such a smaller area than it would be for flat foot. So those young athletes that are having trouble with balance and want to throw tuck, it's going to be more difficult for them because the balance point is much smaller. The surface area is much smaller to balance on. I would encourage them to try to throw flat foot because you've got a larger surface area to balance yourself on. One of the areas definitely that has to be addressed when you're a tuck slider is certainly the throwing device or the throwing broom. It's really important. What we found out when we were analyzing the tuck delivery, that you have to have the proper sliding device, and it should be short in length and covered with duct tape, a really low resistant material. And especially you should have it a low material at the point of the broom, which is probably at the end of the broom handle, that contacts the ice. Like you would have a piece of Teflon. You can see on both these brooms there's a piece of Teflon attached to the end of the one handle of the broom. Either that or you can use a Cobra, which is a stainless steel device that you can attach to the broom itself. But that's really important that it doesn't have any drag at all. The slider, and really another important piece of equipment, you have to have the flexibility of the sliding foot to bend so that you can go on the ball of your foot when you're sliding. So it's really important that that slider either be split in half or that you have the discs that are offered at Asham Curling Supplies. Okay, now we're going to talk about the curling delivery in 4 distinct phases, and this is in regards to the tuck delivery. So we're going to talk about the setup, the pullback, the forward slide, and the release. In the stance or hack position, the delivery is very similar, or the setup is very similar to the flat foot. But anyways, with the broom hand, you want to hold it the same height as a rock handle. You can also hold the broom hand on the ice if you like, but as you notice here with Mike, excuse me, he's holding the broom hand right at the end of the broom. So you would hold it at one end or the other, but it's really important that it's held at the end of the broom handle. And the broom handle is straight, pointing parallel or straight towards the target, in line with the target. One thing you don't want to see happen is the broom being held out to the side. It's harder to control that broom, the sliding broom, when it's out to the side. It's easier when it's pointing straight towards a target. So that's really important. The second phase is the pullback phase. And this is where the broom and the rock handle actually moves back together. So they move back simultaneously together, and you can see that the broom hand stays on that same height. It should stay no higher. Your broom hand should be no higher than your rock handle. Or you may leave it on the ice as well if you like. But again, you don't want to, it keeps your shoulders square when you're pulling it back, and it's just really pulling back a little bit in the pullback motion. The tip or the front of the broom stays on the ice. So you can see in these pictures, with the exception of Vic Peters, he has it at the back. Continuing on with the pullback, again, the sliding foot moves straight back, the hips are lifted and pulled back, and this keeps the shoulders nice and square. And you can see Denny, the top picture on the right, the side view here, you can see again, his height of his broom hand is the same height as the rock hand. And he's just pulling back his sliding foot, keeping his back flat. In the forward motion, as the rock moves forward, the broom also moves forward. And you can see as you're starting the weight transfer from the hack foot to the sliding foot, that's where you're going to have his broom hand that's where you're going to put pressure onto the broom handle. So that's why we say it's really important that the sliding device, the broom, has some sort of low resistant material right there where it contacts the ice. So right at the end of the broom handle. This way it's less resistance and it'll slide with you. Now, as the curler leans on the broom handle, the weight is transferred onto your sliding foot, going towards, on the tuck slide, it's more on the ball of the foot, or that portion of the foot. And the hips are gradually lower as they go into their forward slide. And now the ball of the sliding foot is contact with the ice, with the heel up, slightly angled and directly behind and in line with the rock. And the sliding foot heel supports the lower body and supports the upper thigh or groin of the trailing leg. So as they're moving into the forward slide, you can see in the top picture with Jeff that his weight now is mostly on his ball of his foot, but he hasn't set his heel yet up against his lower thigh. His motion is still going out towards the target so that it's not being dropped into the ice, and his hips will gradually start to lower. And you can see where his broom hand is in relation to the rock. Jeff has a pretty straight arm, so his broom handle is just slightly behind the rock here. In the forward slide itself, your hip should be square. The throwing arm is bent with the elbow pointing out, slightly out. Here you can see Jonathan Mead, and these are really key points to keep note of, is that you can see Jonathan's throwing arm, or his forearm, is parallel to the ice. So it's almost the same level as the rock handle. And if you drew a line from the rock handle right through to his sliding knee, it's almost in line with it. So what we like to see is that forearm to be parallel to the ice, and that his sliding knee to be no lower than the height of a rock handle. And that's really important. The sliding knee is bent maximum to the side, about 60 degrees. And yeah, just making sure the hips are square so that your back is flat. Jonathan does have a bit of a turn with his hips, but but not as bad as other curlers that we've seen. But that's what ideally what you want to see is your hip square. Okay, just other angles, pictures of it that you can see with the forward slide. You can see Jeff's, the front view here, his shoulders are really nice and square, and that's because of his position of his sliding broom. And like I said, with Jeff, he has a more straighter arm than a lot of the tuck deliverers. With Mike, you can see the picture that his throwing his broom hand is more or less beside the rock. And that's only because Mike has a more bent arm in his throwing arm than Jeff does. So with Jeff's picture, you can see that his broom hand is closer to the, behind the rock, whereas Mike is more beside the rock because of that. And really the point of balance with the tuck delivery is definitely your majority of the weight is over top of the ball of the foot. That's and the heel of your sliding foot is locked up against your upper groin or upper thigh of your trailing leg, but there is some weight on the sliding device on the broom, but majority of the weight is on the sliding foot. And just another picture here talking about the trailing leg position that is standing out behind, straight behind the body. And again, there's very little weight on that trailing foot. Most of the weight is on the slider foot, the ball of the foot, with some weight on the broom hand. And again, ideally similar to the flat foot delivery, your slide should be straight and controlled. In other words, you don't want your body to being pulled one way or the other. You want, once you release the stone, you want to be streamlined right in behind the rock with your body. So the stone remains in front of your head and eyes and body, and the body should not be twisted throughout the slide. Like I said, once you release that rock, your body should be flowing right in behind that stone, just like a jet stream. The release, now I have a picture of Victor. He's wearing a glove. Sorry about that, but this is taken in his later years. I'm sure that when he played in his younger years, when he was playing in the international national scene, he probably didn't wear a glove. I'm quite sure of that. But anyways, the release, again, similar to the flat foot delivery, the throwing arm remains bent. And the handle should, you're releasing the handle just before you reach the 12 o'clock position for both turns. And the wrist position can be flat. With the tuck deliveries, we find that it depends on their position of the throwing arm. But there are some tuckers that have a high wrist as well. And again, the hand finishes in the handshake release. So a really relaxed handshake release pointing towards the target. So that's the analysis of the flat foot delivery, the tuck delivery. The follow through, again, still same as the flat foot, that you continue down the slide, down the line of delivery. And again, majority of your weight continues on the rest of your sliding foot, the ball of your sliding foot, sorry. Okay, just moving on now. So we're gonna talk now about the differences and the similarities between the two deliveries. And both deliveries have a purpose, is to consistently deliver the rock along the intended line with the proper weight and appropriate rotation. So on the left here, you can see the ideal model of the flat foot deliverer, and that's Brad Gushu, against tuck deliverer. A model here was Mike McEwen. So you can see I drew a straight line down the middle of the stone because that's your line of delivery. And you can see with Brad Gushu that there's 1/3 on one side and 2/3 on the other. And the same thing with the tuck delivery. Down the center with Mike, you can see 1/3 on one side and 2/3 on the other. So really no difference in your body position behind the stone. I think it's really important though that you deliver the rock along its intended line and you have the proper weight as well as the appropriate rotation. Okay, similarities to the flat foot slide. So we're going to again talk about the phases and talk about in each phase what's similar to for both deliveries, similar and differences. So the setup is actually very similar, although the broom position is different. The grip on the handle of the stone is the same. The initial rock position is the same. The pullback is the same. So whether it's a tuck or flat foot, these are all the same. Line of delivery is the same. The timing is the same. The position of the trailing foot is the same. Throwing arm and the release and follow through. So you can see right now that there is quite a few similarities to the flat foot slide with the tuck. There's only really a few differences, to be honest. Okay, so the setup phase, the key fundamentals. So key fundamentals is making sure that the ball of your foot rests against the back of your hack and that you have equal weight on both feet. And this is regardless whether it's a tuck or the flat foot. The heel of the sliding foot should come about even with the toe of your hack foot. As an instructor in a junior high performance program, I can't emphasize enough that I really think that the setup phase is underrated. I think the kids jump into the hack and try to start into their delivery way too quickly. And a lot of times when I have little Johnny that's so fast to get out of the hack, I usually have little Johnny I'll say, okay, Johnny, you got to count to 5. Before you leave this hack, count to 5 and make sure everything's set up. Just so he slows down and make sure that everything's set up to the target. The setup phase is so important because the way you set up in the hack is going to reflect the way you come out to deliver. And if you're not set up properly in the hack, you're going to have some compensation in those other phases to make up for that. So it's best that you take the extra time to make sure that your athlete is set up properly in the hack. And I can't stress enough how it's important to make sure that position of your feet are really important, that you have at least a fist width a space between your knees, and that your sliding foot's flat on the ice and that you have a heel to toe relationship. The heel of your sliding foot should come about even with your toe of your hack foot. And to make sure that your athletes are putting their foot in the middle of the hack when they go down, not on one side or the other, that they're actually, because the hacks are concave, if you place your foot not in the middle, it's going to realign your hips and it's not going to help you set up towards a target. Key fundamentals for the rock is that the center of the rock usually should line up with the crease of your armpit, your throwing armpit. So somewhere around there, so that your center of the rock is end up lining up with the crease of your throwing armpit. And again, that you're starting off the rock position in the appropriate turn that you're going to be throwing, whether it's the 10 o'clock or the 2 o'clock position. Differences in the setup is what I mentioned before is the broom position. So with a flat foot delivery, the brush is held against your lower back with the brush head out to the side, usually even with your sliding foot or the rock or somewhere between that area. With the tuck delivery, the broom is actually held at the very back of the handle or close to one end, and the broom is straight ahead, parallel or in line with the target at the far end, and this will square off your shoulders. Now, the pullback, and this is the first moving phase of the curling delivery. It begins when you first set the stone in motion and ends when you leave the hack. The pullback involves the larger muscles, the bigger muscles. It's the hips, and the hips are anchored in the backward motion. Everything moves back together, and it's moved back, making sure that the hips remain square to the target and level with the ice. So one of the similarities, definitely with the pullback, is no matter whether it's a tuck or the flat foot, the pullback is the same. The motion is exactly the same. The only difference is with the broom position. And I did forget to mention that with the stance position with a flat foot delivery, you can, rather than have the broom handle against your lower back, you can actually be a John Morris and have the broom handle on the ice if you like. Okay, going back to the pullback phase here, is that you want to make sure, with the no lift delivery, it really has simplified the delivery so much. There's less movement involved, and in one of the areas certainly that it's really simplified, it is during the pullback motion, because now you not have to lift up the rock and make sure that about your rock path when you're lifting up, controlling it. It's all controlled without having to lift it up. So with that in mind, when you pull the rock back, your sliding foot moves straight back, and then as you're going forward, it would go straight forward. But as you move the sliding foot straight back, your hips start to move back too. Your hips are lifted and pulled back, keeping your back relatively flat. And you can see the picture with Caitlin Laws is an ideal. She's got a really nice flat back. And you can see that both the tucker, which is Denny up top, and Caitlin down below, they produce both a flat back. Plus you can see that both of them pull their sliding foot back, and both sliding foots are flat on the ice. The rock fundamentals is just making sure that the rock is pulled back along that line of delivery, that it's not being deviated off that line. So it goes straight back, still on that line of delivery. And the length of your pullback might vary depending upon the weight that you're throwing. If you're going to throw more weight, you might have your sliding foot go back a little bit more. But certainly the rock position can't go back anymore because you'll hit your hack foot. One thing that I stress or I would emphasize is that during the pullback motion, it's not a good idea. It's a bad habit if your athlete brings a sliding foot, he or she brings a sliding foot too far back. You know, at the club that Denny was at the top slide there's a lot of room between the hack and the backboard so that the athlete can get away with bringing their sliding foot really far back. And if they get a habit of doing that, then when they go to play at a club that doesn't have that space and the backboard's really nice and tight to the hack, it's gonna interfere with their delivery. So it's not a good habit to have. It's just excessive motion. So it's best that they just bring the sliding foot just past the hack, whether or not it's a takeout or a draw. Forward slide. Okay, this is the phase of the curling delivery, that the movement of the body forward of the hack into the final delivery position. So the forward slide phase is a key component to ensuring that the correct path of delivery to the target and proper weight. The previous stages were the preliminary movements that set the stage for the forward slide. So you've got to make sure that everything that was done before is still in line towards a target, to make sure that you're still going out towards your target and you're staying on the line of delivery. The key fundamentals, again, as a sliding foot comes forward, it actually moves straight forward and gradually moves underneath the center of gravity. With either the tuck or the flat, I would discourage your athletes to try to turn your foot outwards with the toe out. I find that actually sets the stage for a lot of flaws when they turn the sliding foot out too far to begin at, too early in their slide. A lot of times it attributes to drifting. That's why I always say is straight back with the sliding foot and straight forward out towards a target. And then it gradually turns out. The trailing leg is extended out behind, the shoulders are square, and your broom position, with regardless whether it's the tuck or flat foot, it's very similar to your setup position. So one thing that I like about these two pictures that I really find is really important to note is that here you can see both Mike and Caitlin, they actually do a lunge out of the hack. In other words, they're not dropping their hips early into the ice. This means that they're actually driving their weight out towards a target and not down into the ice. And that's really important to drive to your athletes, because we see a lot of athletes collapse, that they actually drive their hips right into the ice and they lose that weight down rather than out towards a target. So it's really important that they have the strength in their legs to keep them up higher and longer, so they actually gradually drop their hips down as they're progressing into their slide. Now, the differences in the forward slide with the tuck delivery is, as I mentioned before, the forearm of your throwing arm is parallel to the ice and the same level as a rock handle. And it's, if you drew a line from the rock handle out, you can see with Denny here that his sliding knee is about even with the rock handle. You don't want it any lower than that. With the broom hand, with Denny, you can see that his broom hand's just slightly behind the stone here, and his broom is parallel to the target, the far end, in line with the target. Majority of his weight is over top of his ball of his foot, and his heel is locked now into his upper thigh or groin area, and his slide continues down the line of delivery. Okay, he'll have some of his weight on his broom hand, but majority of it will be on his sliding foot, on the ball of his foot. Forward slide with a flat foot delivery. Your throwing arm is nice and bent, and you can see here with this athlete that his forearm is again parallel to the ice. The broom position is always in a position that's going to keep your shoulders square. So it should be somewhere between, your sliding foot to your rock, but certainly no further back and no further forward too. If it's further forward, it won't be resting against your lower back, and if you're using it for some balance, it could slip. So that ideally we want it sort of in that between those two areas. Your trailing leg extended straight out behind, and you can have the contact of your toes of your trailing foot touching the ice. I know it's changed with the position of the sliding foot now, position of the trailing leg. It should be straight. So in other words, we talked about it being turned in or turned out, but now it's changed to being straight. And I think it's really important that the toe of your trailing foot should be dipped, or should have some low resistant material, especially if it's a leather shoe, because that'll cause some drag. And I think it's best that the athlete doesn't have that drag, so that's why it's dipped. I think that's really important for curlers to have their shoe dipped for that reason. And then again, most of the body weight's underneath the center or your sliding foot, and the slide continues down the line of delivery. Okay, differences in the slide itself is that with the flat foot, we know the foot is flat on the ice, somewhat flat on the ice, and bears the body weight, whereas the tuck delivery, the ball of the sliding foot takes most of the weight for the balance, with that a little bit of weight on that broom side. With a flat foot delivery, the sliding knee is angled slight to the side of the body, approximately under the same shoulder armpit, and the broom handle is resting against the lower back, or it can be on the ice with the broom head parallel to the rock, or somewhere between the rock and the sliding foot, in between those two areas. Where the tuck delivery, the sliding knee is bent to the maximum about 60-degree angle, and the broom hand is beside or slightly behind the rock with the broom handle flat on the ice, and it's pointing towards a target. So with a flat foot delivery, your sliding foot is underneath the body's vertical axis, approximately to the sternum, with the heels turned slightly in, or the toe points slightly out. And again, I caution you about having your athlete get into turning the foot out too early in their slide. That can lead to certainly a drift. With the tuck delivery, the ball of the sliding foot is in contact with the ice with the heel up, and the heel of the sliding foot supports the lower body and rests on the upper thigh, just underneath the hip bone or underneath the groin area of the trailing leg, as you can see with Jeff on the back. So in looking at the slide from the front, again, you can see with Brad Gushu, he's more upright. So the flat foot delivery is much higher than the tuck delivery, whereas you can see Jeff, he's more low. where the tuck delivery is much lower, like sighting a rifle. Okay, and I know Rob's going to take this over talking about the variations of tuck deliveries.
Thanks, Connie. Yeah, so we got lots of great examples of sort of the prototypical tuck delivery there with Connie's portion of the presentation. Mike McEwen, Jeff Stoughton, John Mead, Denny Neufeld, they all have very prototypical tuck deliveries. They're a great benchmark for what the tuck delivery is, just like Glenn Howard or Brad Gushu are a good benchmark for what a flat foot delivery is. But as we all know, there's different variations with both deliveries. And so my portion of the presentation is just going to be talking about some variations and what challenges and what benefits they have. So as you can see here, we have the same athlete sliding with a high tuck and a low tuck. That's not something seen very often. But I played with a season with Jason Gunlickson. I was fortunate enough to curl with him. And he's a very unique individual, as we all know, and he's got some great ideas and sees the game a certain way. And I was talking with him one day about this, and he was telling me how he always looked up to Kerry Burtnick as a great drawer as a tuck, because tuckers are usually known for their high hard win ability, as Jason is, but he was he admired Kerry Burtnick's ability to touch and feel. And Kerry, as we know, kind of was higher. So Jason implemented that into his delivery. So as you can see in the top photos, he's quite high, his torso is quite high, and he does that on a lot of his touch shots, his draws. And in the bottom photos, we're all familiar with his 5-second peels that he throws. And he likes to get a lot lower, a lot more streamlined, more aerodynamic for his heavier, harder throws. It allows him to get lower and see the rock along with the line. I always like to think of it as darts, throwing a dart at a dartboard. Everyone kind of takes the dart, puts it in front of their eyes so they can see the target and the instrument that they're throwing. And that's much like a tucker. You can see the rock and the target at the same time. If you were throwing a dart without looking at it, it would be a lot more difficult to hit a bullseye. Another thing I want you guys to check out is when he's lower, you can see his arm position is a lot different. So his elbow is quite low to the ice. His delivering hand, his wrist is a lot lower. And especially on the right-hand side of the screen there, his outturn changes quite a bit. So it goes from a nice high wrist to very low, and he's gripping the handle almost underneath it. And that's just how he has worked around being lower and not being able to hold the rock the same way. So it's very important. You can see the differences. And for Jason, it's really commendable how I struggle enough with one delivery. He has two unique deliveries and he's great with them. So yeah, that's the high tuck and low tuck. Connie, if you wanted to switch to the next slide, we can see Jason again in his high tuck, and we have Brennan Botcher there. Great flat foot delivery, obviously just won a Canadian championship. And if you took a piece of paper or something to block half of their body so you couldn't see their feet and just looked at their arm positioning, I would say those are very similar deliveries. So that's what Jason is trying to implement with a high tuck delivery like that. He's trying to get the same body position as a flat footer would. And we know the flat foot delivery is great for drawing. Obviously, Glenn Howard comes to mind as one of the most exceptional drawers of our time, and Jeff Stoughton is one of the best hitters, and you can see why, because of their deliveries in a sense. So Jason, again, has that high torso, which allows him to have a high wrist and have his arm in a particular position to set the stone at 2 o'clock and turn it to 12 o'clock like a traditional outturn would be. He uses this for better feel, as I said, for his draws, and he gets a lot lower for his hits. So now that we've seen the high tuck, I think the next slide will show us a great example of some low tuckers, which is, these pictures are awesome. I love them because you can see their elbows are quite low, touching the ice even, and that's BJ Neufeld and Colton Lott, and I don't know if any of you guys had caught the mixed doubles this morning, but Colton Lott was competing in that on TSN. But fundamentally, there's a lot of differences with a higher tuck or a flat foot delivery and this low tuck delivery. And as a coach, you might not encounter this, especially if you're from outside of Manitoba. It might not be something that you ever come into contact with, but it's neat to look at and see some variations in the delivery. I like to use golf as analogies a lot because there's a lot of similarities between curling and golf, and Jim Furyk and Matthew Wolf come to mind as golfers with very unique swings, but they find a way to make it work. And same with these curlers, they're very unique, but it works for them. So Colton is quite low. Oh, sorry, Connie, I was just finishing up on that side. Thanks. Colton's so low that his wrist is even touching the back of the rock, and I think he's kind of worked on not doing that. This photo is from 2016. And he's tried to get a little bit higher and not have his hands so low. And what this causes is, because if you look at BJ Neufeld, his chin is only 6 to 8 inches from the ice. So there's a lot of cramping in there and a lot of room. Oh, could you please let us know who you are? Sorry, is that from you, Melissa? To me?
No, sorry, that is for a participant who's not identified themselves.
Oh,
So
okay, sorry.
Sorry to bug you.
No, that's okay. I thought I needed to reintroduce myself. Anyhow, BJ is quite low to the ice, very different from the high tuck or the flat foot delivery, where there's lots of room to put your arm underneath your body and get to a certain position. And so that leads us into the next slide here, and what I wanted to talk briefly about, because it is something unique, and we all know with unique deliveries that not always the standard or the appropriate technical delivery works. So for someone who slides very low and has a low tuck, they really don't have enough room to get their arm underneath their body. And so you see their elbow outside of their body a lot. And so Matt Dunstone here, again, I was fortunate enough to play with Matt. And I always would tease him because he starts his handle of his rock on his out turn at 12 o'clock, if not 11 o'clock. Like, he starts it so straight. It's funny. I always would joke about not knowing what turn he was throwing as he was coming out of the hack. But this is a phenomenal picture. He's obviously throwing an out turn here. And we're taught to start that at 2 o'clock and turn it to 12 o'clock. But due to some of the limitations that someone so low to the ice has, they have to work around it in a particular way. And that is to start the rock at 12 o'clock and turn it past noon to about 10 o'clock to get the desired rotation. And there's some limitations with that as well. There's definitely a learning curve if you're a team that has 3 members who throw it from 2 to 12 and have someone who throws it from 12 to 10. That's going to take a lot of repetition to try and get your releases similar and try and get the rotation similar. So we can see a couple of examples here. And we have BJ Neufeld and Jeff Stoughton. And Jeff is not necessarily that high as a tucker, but he's high enough that he can get his arm in a position to cock the rock or set it at 2 o'clock. And so you can see the higher torso, and he just has more space to put his throwing arm there, just like a flat footer would. He can have a nice high wrist, and it's easier for him to manipulate the rock to a more standard traditional starting position on an out turn. Now, BJ Neufeld, and there's lots of curlers who deliver a stone this way. Anna Hasselberg, Nick Dean, as a couple that aren't even, I wouldn't generally classify them as a tuck delivery, but they do have a straighter stone with their out turn. So BJ, he has a very low torso. If he was trying to put his arm in the same position as Jeff, being that low to the ice, it would be very difficult. If any of you guys are close to a desk or something like that, I would encourage you to try putting your face close to the desk and try and put your arm in there and start your hand at what a 2 o'clock position would be for an out turn. It's very difficult and uncomfortable. So he has this kind of chicken wing effect going on, which is his elbow outside of his body. He has a lower wrist, and for those reasons, makes it difficult for him to start it at 2 o'clock. He starts it at 12 o'clock noon. And this is something myself as a tucker, I've always had a lazy out turn, as we would call it, probably have a rotation less than the rest of my teammates. And for the last year and a bit, I've been working on starting with a straighter out turn and turning it like some of these guys, and it's worked a lot better, because I would try and start it at 2 and it would more be like 1 o'clock, and then you turn it to 12 and it doesn't have enough rotation on it to get 3.5 or 4.5 or whatever you're looking for down a sheet of ice. So it is a good fix for any of you who are teaching kids who slide low. And then for the next slide, it's more of the same. We have Martin Furl, sorry, my bad. His name is eluding me right now. Michael Fournier, thank you. He is a higher tuck and he can set that out turn just like that, conventional handle. And Ryan Fry, who is a lower tuck, and he has his arm kind of in that same position that BJ would. And he doesn't have it quite at 12, but I mean, I wouldn't call it 2 either. It's more like, 1, maybe leading towards 12 o'clock. And Ryan Fry has often had this issue with the teams that he was on. I know when he was playing with Brad Jacobs, the announcers on TV talked quite often about how his rocks would have less rotation and therefore curl a bit more. So he just has to be cognizant of that. And like I said, having a straighter handle and making sure that you're turning it properly is a good fix, especially for the out turn. And so, like I mentioned before, Nick Adine, that bottom left picture, it's pretty straight out turn. And what he has a delivery, you could call it a tuck, you could call it a hybrid. He's kind of like, I would say, the best of both worlds, and he's a very, very good curler. And he does something similar to what Jason Gunlickson does with his unique delivery when he's throwing draws and touch shots. He puts the broom on the small of his back and is higher up like a flat footer. And when he's throwing the high hard one, a takeout, he puts the broom on the ice, or as you can see, kind of hovering above the ice, because he's so he has such good body control and balance that he doesn't really even put much weight on the broom, but he's a lot lower when he's throwing those hits. And so here's some more hybrids, and this is the more conventional style hybrid that we think of when we hear that term, as someone who has the traditional broom on the back like a flat footer, but has their foot positioning much like a tucker. And I saw a few comments in the chat, the question answer about females, and it seems like there might be more males that slide tuck than females. And I would say that's probably true. I don't know the reasoning for that, but I would say there's more females that lean towards this type of delivery, which would be a hybrid delivery. And as we saw at this year's Scotties, there was quite a few Manitoba teams. And I would say Jennifer is quite traditionally flat foot. But the other 4 are all, the skips are all a hybrid style delivery. You could see Carrie Anderson back-to-back Scotties champions. We have Chelsea Carey, who's won 2 Scotties herself. Mackenzie Zacharias, who is the reigning Canadian and World Junior champion. So they have had tremendous success with this delivery. And so while you may not encounter a traditional tucker if you're not from Manitoba or surrounding area, because it's quite regionalized, you probably would find a lot of this hybrid style delivery. And you can go one of 2 ways with it. You can try and convert them to a traditional flat footer, or you can embrace the hybrid and continue letting them slide on the ball of their foot. I think either is a good solution, but I would encourage you to maybe play around with keeping them the way they are, because like I said, there's been lots of success with that delivery. It does have its flaws, but it is a good delivery that encourages touch for draws, and you're on the ball of your toe and you can throw it a little bit harder for hits. So like I said, it's mostly from Manitoba, but it's not just Manitoba. And that's kind of what we wanted to stress, because I know there's people on this call from all over Canada. So if you do encounter someone who slides tuck, you maybe have learned a thing or 2 today to implement into teaching them how to improve their tuck delivery. So we have a few guys here, Colton Flash from Saskatchewan, who has a great tuck delivery. There's this gentleman named Owen Purcell from Nova Scotia that was at the U18 a couple years ago. I think he might have been to a Canadian Juniors as well, and he's a full-on tucker with a corn broom. Thomas Muirhead from Scotland, Eve Muirhead's brother. He's a tucker as well. And you saw a picture of Michael Fournier a few slides ago, and his lead, Jean-Francois, is also a tucker. And then down in this corner is a kind of a funny little story. These are, I played in this event called the Manitoba Open or the MCA Bonspiel. I'm sure there's a few of you that are familiar with that. And sometimes teams come up with funny names because it's just a fun bonspiel. And we were lined up to play this team. They were called the Virginia Tuckers. And so I didn't think anything of it. We ended up playing them and went up for a drink afterwards, and we're chatting with them. And they were all from West Virginia. And there was a gentleman who came down from Manitoba, pretty much started curling in the West Virginia area. They still don't have a dedicated facility, but they curl in a hockey rink. And when people came to play, he would teach them how to throw a curling rock. And the way that he knew how to throw was with the tuck delivery, being from Manitoba. So we played these guys in the Manitoba Open. And then I got a DM on Instagram randomly out of the blue from the guy throwing right there. And he asked me if I wanted to go down to North Carolina and play in a bonspiel with them. And so it was last September. We weren't curling at the time. So I said, sure, that'd be great. So I went down there for the weekend, played with these guys, had a blast, still keep in touch with them. Brought down some Asham hoodies. Thanks Asham for sponsoring this. Brought down those Manitoba hoodies so you could see the female curler sweeping the rock there. She's got rocking a Manitoba hoodie. And it's just kind of funny because you wouldn't think of anyone from from West Virginia curling, let alone sliding with a tuck delivery. So it's quite interesting. And yeah, so speaking of tuck deliveries, we have a few more to show you, some unique ones.
Yeah, so we're gonna go through some photos of tuck deliveries. And just one thing to note is what we find is that there is a stereotype of good tuckers. Most tuck curlers are not very big. I mean, there are some exceptions like Carrie Burtnick and Vic Peters, but most of the successful ones are really small people. Like Jeff's not a very big person, Mike's not a very big person, Jock Gauthier's not big, Jonathan Mead's not big. I mean, there are exceptions to it, but we find that a lot of the smaller men are better. They seem to be a better example of the tuck delivery. So here, at these two examples, Jeff and Mike, they became our model tuckers. And there's Denny Neufeld, and we talked a lot about him already. But again, you can see, his arm position. You can see the position of their sliding foot or his sliding foot. So just that they don't have their foot turned out too much. When I talked to Jeff about, what's the difference between, your slide and a flat foot? And he said to me, Connie, my slide's really, I'm a flat foot. All I do is lift up my heel or have my heel up. So, and that's the way he looked at his slide. Again, Denny from the side. Now, one thing really important to note is that when I show this to someone that doesn't know Denny's a tuck delivery, you would think that he is flat foot, because a lot of the tuckers, well, a lot of the junior tuckers would actually already set their heel against their upper thigh. They set it too early. But ideally where you want to set it, where Denny will set it and where Mike will set it and Jeff will set it, will be where they reach around the 12-foot area, the back of the 12-foot area. That's when they're going to start to set their heel of their sliding foot up against their upper thigh. So that's really important to note. But again, you can see, where his position of his sliding device is here. It's just keeping his shoulders nice and square, and that is just slightly behind the rock. Another picture of Matt.
Yeah, we have Matt here again throwing an out turn. He's got quite a straight handle, and he's got quite a good delivery. He sometimes tends to twist a little bit, but for the most part, his shoulders remain pretty square. And same fundamentals as Jeff or Mike. He has the broom in the correct position. He doesn't get too low, even though he has a straight out turn, which starts the out turn straight like most low tuckers would. he doesn't get as low as, say, Colton or BJ. And again, you could see that from the side, like Connie mentioned before. If you draw a straight line through the rock to his knee is on the same level of the rock. His forearm of his throwing arm is straight down. So very good sound fundamentals. You can see a bit of shifting in his hips there, which causes the back to not be quite as straight as some of the other throws that we'll see coming up. I think in a few slides, there'll be a nice straight one that you'll see a somewhat difference in the back. So here's Kyle Doring, who's another tuck delivery. For him, unique is he has a delivering device that's not a corn broom. It is a stabilizer, and his is kind of custom made, so it sits quite low, and it's pretty much the same height as the rock, which is good for him to keep his shoulders square. If it was higher, it would probably throw off his shoulder alignment a little bit. So it's good that it's nice and low to the ground. Just like you can see here, he has it quite close to the rock. His back, I would say, is quite straight. He has a very sound textbook kind of tuck delivery. And so in speaking about position of the throwing hand, the broom hand, which is quite important, this is another athlete who has a very good tuck delivery on the bottom side, but his shoulders are a little skewed, and that is directly because of where he has his throwing broom. And you can see in the side picture the difference between where Kyle had his, which was pretty close to the rock, same with Jeff and Mike, and where this athlete has his broom is almost, I would say, a foot behind everyone else that we've seen. And you can see that's opening up his left shoulder. So an easy fix for him is to just move that the broom hand closer up towards the rock, and that'll help square his shoulders.
Yeah, and here's another good example of a tuck delivery. He's got a nice good throwing forearm, and where his position of his broom hand is good too. And he's very streamlined, which you can see from the back as well. And then another good example here, again, a nice position of his throwing arm and his broom position too, where it is in relation to the rock. It's really nice and tight to the rock too. And his position of his sliding foot, that is not too turned out, and that it's up against his upper thigh of his trailing foot. Now here's a fellow that plays with Mike McEwen, Derek, or I forgot his name now.
Samogulski.
Yeah, so anyways, Derek, right. He's got a bit of a lean to him, and that is because you can see his sliding knee is actually quite low to the ice. But not to say that, he makes a lot of shots. So he's really customized his delivery for his own benefit. Certainly we're teaching you, or we're giving you really the fundamentals of the tuck delivery. And once your athlete begins to understand their tuck delivery, then they can customize it at that point. All we're trying to do is, just like the flat foot delivery, is that we're trying to sort of set a standard. And then once the athlete understands their delivery and knows, what's happening with their delivery when things go wrong and how to correct it, then, it's up to them. They can customize it at that point. And definitely, Derek has customized his, and he makes a lot of great shots for sure. Talking about, a flaw of the tuck delivery is certainly what we call a slingshot delivery. And here we can see it in this athlete that he's really positioning his upper body or his head behind the stone rather than his body itself. So his body is traveling down a different path than the rock. And this athlete probably believes that he's in behind the stone, which he is with his head, but his body is not following through with the stone. And we'll talk about the reasoning for this position.
Yeah, and here's Kate Cameron. So a female curler that slides in a traditional tuck delivery style. There's a few others. Kathy Gauthier's daughter, Gaetan, slides like that as well. And Carrie Burtnick's daughter, Laura Burtnick, slides with a corn broom the whole the whole 9 yards as well. And Kate is a phenomenal curler, phenomenal hitter, and she has a really good tuck delivery. Her broom is a little further away from the rock in terms of laterally, so it makes her quite broad, which is, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the way that she slides. That's quite the delivery. Back in my younger years, I don't have much to critique about this. I think it's pretty good. Hey, Connie, what do you think? I will say a funny story is Connie had mentioned before about the throwing device, the corn broom, and it's very unique to each curler, each individual. And so this was on a Sunday of our men's provincial championship semifinal and final day. And we were playing Reed Carruthers in the semifinal, and I went out for pre-game practice. And I used to slide with a metal, a steel device called a Cobra on my corn broom. And so we went out for our pregame practice, and for whatever reason, it must have hit something in the broom bag. I'm not sure, but it was leaving some scratching in the ice. So I couldn't really use it. I was talking to Reed. He's like, "Yeah, no, you're not using it." We were joking around. So I ended up having to use Matt's corn broom the entire game, which he slid with Teflon, and I had never really slid with a corn broom with Teflon before. It sounds like such a small detail, but it is very different. So I played the provincial semi and the provincial final with Matt Dunstone's corn broom instead of my own, and I ended up playing okay, but it was kind of funny. Different challenge.
And here we have Jock Gauthier, who's a Canadian junior and world champion. And you can see with Jock, his sliding knee is almost touching the ice there. So, you know, and Jock's not a big person at all. He's, you know, I just wonder, you know, later on, he may have, you know, depends if he's got to keep in good shape so that the stress isn't going to be put on that knee being in that angle. But he's, like I said before, he's in a position that he customize, you know, he knows his delivery and customize it for himself. And here's another fellow again. Same thing, you know, he's right in behind the stone. His upper body is really quite upright in this tuck slide, and you can see where his broom position is. He's holding it rather than it being straight forward, that it's in behind, and his sliding knee is really quite low to the ice.
Yeah, now we have a series of, I think there's about 4 deliveries that have a lot of similarities. And one of them is that they're quite upright, as you can see. And you can see his throwing device is angled out to the side. And so this picture isn't a great angle of what this does to a tuck delivery, but he actually is kind of on the side of the rock. And so he has his head underneath the rock, but his body is off to the side. And you can see it better in the next picture here. And this is Daly Peters, and it's the same delivery, basically. Broom off to the side, angled back, and that causes issues in terms of drift and whatnot. That's why we kind of, in terms of the prototypical tuck delivery, or what we'd like to teach, is having the broom straight out in front is a lot easier than having it off to the side in order to control. So Daly's the same, and the next picture as well is another athlete, similar problems, broom off to the side, body angled in that sort of slingshot style that Connie was alluding to before. The head is under the rock, which makes them believe that their body also is, but when you show athletes like this a video of them sliding, it's funny how many times they have that wide eye moment of, wow, I'm really doing that, because what their brain is telling them they're doing and what the video shows are 2 different things, and it's quite a unique experience to show them. And finally, we have one final picture. This is a lefty who does the exact same thing, and he's made it work. Obviously, is JT Ryan, who is a very, very good curler from Manitoba. He went to 3 straight Canadian juniors and lost the final a couple years ago. But he has the same tendency. His broom is angled off to the side, which is increasing drag, and as well his body is shifted off to the side, and it's really only his head that's kind of under the rock. So those are 4 very similar deliveries that probably could be fixed with a few minor tweaks. And we're going to go into some video right after this to show a few different slides and kind of the major issues that those slides are having.
Yeah, so I'm just going to put up some videos and we're going to do a little bit of analysis on some tuck slides and show you, like I said, some flaws in the slides and talk about them. So I'm just going to pull them up here. Okay. All right. Okay, so the first slide or the first video I'm going to show you is one of our model tuckers, and that's Jeff Stoughton. I'm just going to try to make this a little bigger for you. There we go. There. Hopefully that you can see that well in your screen. So here's a video of Jeff coming out. So you can see how nice and low and his shoulders are fairly square. And you can see where his broom position is straight ahead. And with Jeff, like I said, he's one of the few tuckers, or one of the tuckers that keeps his arms straight. So again, I'll just show that to you again. I'm sorry, I can't get rid of the blue marks in the middle. So he comes back, same thing, the pullback is the same as with the flat foot delivery, straight back. And as he moves into his forward slide, again, pretty nice and low, and pretty much the same delivery every time. Not much change. Okay, what I want to do now is talk about some flaws in the slide. And this video will show you a good example of what we were talking about in regards to the slingshot delivery. Okay, so you can see definitely that the rock is going down the line of delivery, but however, his body is following a different path, which is what we call a slingshot. So what we like to do is talk about, what's causing this to happen. So if we slow everything down, definitely in the stance, I'd like to see more separations between his knees. I find that a little too tight together. But that's certainly not causing the slingshot. What's causing the slingshot, if you watch his sliding foot, watch the motion of the sliding foot where we talk about that he forces it across and tries to set it too early against his upper thigh of his trailing leg. And you can see it I'll try to slow right down so you can see that. See his sliding foot, how it's turned out right away? And now it's trying to get across, and see how far across it goes? So it's going way too far across, and that drops his left hip. Therefore, now he's got force going to the other way, and his rock is trying to go down the line of delivery where his body's going the other way. I'll play that again. But this is a really good example to show you what happens when you have a slingshot delivery. And it's a combination of, he's got a few things not going right for him that's actually producing this slide. And the one thing that's not going right is definitely his sliding foot is not going straight forward. It's starting to go straight across. See how he turns it? And now it's going across his body. And it goes way too far outside his upper thigh area. So his sliding foot is almost shown on the other side of his leg. And then his hip is dropped so low because of that. And that's what's producing this slingshot delivery. I don't know, Rob, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think that you pretty much hit the nail on the head there. That's the main difference between a flat foot delivery and a tuck delivery is the foot position, obviously. And for a flat foot delivery, it doesn't have to get all the way to your opposite hip, much like the tuck does. So as an athlete that slides tuck, you really, in order to feel balanced, you want to get that foot in that position. But the catch-22 of it is if you get that foot in that position too soon, then it's the trailing leg that has to try and rudder and correct it. And that's what you're seeing there. And that's what you're seeing that Jeff does is he doesn't set it underneath him or across him like this athlete does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked a clinic one time with John Mead and he pretty much dumbed it down for me. And I tell everyone that I work with now what he told me, and it was what Connie had mentioned earlier, but whether you slide flat foot or tuck, your main goal is to go straight back and straight through out to the line of target. So even if you want to get that foot across you to feel comfortable in that position, the first motion has to be straight out to the target.
Okay, and there we go. Okay, and here's two more deliveries. The one on the right is an athlete that throws quite well with the tuck, and the one on the left is having difficulty throwing the tuck, and you'll see it. And I'll just try to sync them here. Whoa. There we go. So you can see the person on the left, you know, we've, again, the slingshot. So whereas you get the person on the right is much more streamlined, more of a tuck with the proper position of a sliding device. So looking at the athlete that's having difficulty with his slide, definitely one thing that we want to focus on is maybe changing his sliding device for sure, making it shorter. And you can see that that his sliding device as well, it's inside of his sliding knee, whereas with the curler on the right, his sliding device is almost sort of in line with the knee itself. That is not so much inside of his knee. It's almost in line with it. Just going, and also the person on the left, again, you know, he's trying to get his head, he's leaning his upper body to being more in behind the stone. So you can see his upper body is quite bent, leaning over, rather than, you know, the tucker on the right, his body is pretty straight in behind the stone. Okay. All right, I've got another one to show. I'll just show this one by herself here. Okay, so here's another tucker. Okay, and I'm going to play that again. Let's play it back. Okay, so with this this person, not much of a pullback motion at all, very little or none, as you can see. And with a young athlete, I would prefer a pullback. I think there's purposes to each of the phases of the delivery. And the purpose of the pullback is to provide you with timing to make sure that, you know, everything's ready to go into the forward slide. So there's a timing piece to it to make sure that you're going to have the proper motion of the rock coming first and the sliding foot to fall in behind. The other purpose of the pullback motion is to make sure that you've got some weight generating coming back so that it would come forward towards a target. So you can generate weight going forward. It's like whatever goes up must come down, whatever goes back must come forward. Now, definitely there are issues with and also without a pullback. But as a young athlete, I think it's really important, especially they're still developing and they don't have the strength. So they should have the proper timing. And I think that would involve and also have some sort of weight transfer coming back. So that's why I believe that it's good that they learn that until they get much stronger. And then eventually if they want to, changes, that's up to them. But again, I think it's important that we teach them the proper method at this time. The other issue that this athlete has is that you can see where she puts her sliding device. It's really, again, she's leaning like this, similar to the athlete that we just saw, that she's leaning her upper body in behind the stone, and her sliding device is on the inside of her knee for that. So what we need her to do is we need to get that sliding device out more in front of her sliding knee. And I know Rob mentioned about her sliding device. You want to?
Yeah, I think, and someone actually just commented, looks like she's trying to generate speed, but the rock is holding her back. So obviously she's a young athlete who rocks are heavy. We all know that. And I was in a camp one time and they were talking about how you need to have control of your rock. And I think that's what she lacks a little bit of is control with a lot of different areas of her delivery. It's very sporadic. You can see her foot moving that way, her bobbing up and down, and no real pullback. And now her throwing arm is already moving kind of all over the place, and her arm with her corn broom is also kind of moving. So there's just a lot of slight movements that for me seem like she's not necessarily in control of her entire delivery. And it goes back to what Connie was talking about with having a nice pullback and going forward. That's a good way to make sure you're nice and strong and in control at that moment. And then that'll help with the remainder of your delivery and kick out. And again, we can put her side by side with Jeff here. I think that's a good comparison to really demonstrate how Jeff is in control of every aspect of his delivery, including if you watch his corn broom as opposed to her broom, he's bringing it back and it really doesn't move off that line. And hers, it's just everything is moving in a lot of different directions. And so that causes issues. So that would be the main fix for me at first, is just to make sure that she is comfortable and in control a bit more of different aspects of her delivery.
Yeah, one thing in working with athletes that have those issues, one ways that you can correct it, definitely what we do a lot is we do what we call a lunge out of the hack without a rock, so that we try to get them, they've developed this and it's almost like it's a bad habit. We like to teach those that haven't developed these bad habits because it's easier to fix. However, they've got to get used to doing something different, and it's going to feel different. So what we do is we get them lunging out of the hack with a proper motion of where their body is and the sliding foot position. So they're not going to start doing that lean with their upper body trying to get in behind. They're going to be more square with that. And not just, we do that on the ice with them, but we also practice that off the ice as well. We try to put their body position the way we want them to have it in. But again, it's just repetition on ice and get them feeling for when it is proper. And this is what we want them to do, is have that feeling when it feels good and it's right. Then we want you to keep that feeling of what that feels like. So this way they will know eventually that they're doing it right. The one athlete that we had worked with before this athlete here that is throwing really quite well. I didn't want to put this down. He's been working on his delivery. He had been doing that, not to the severity as the other athletes, but he's worked on it and now he's perfected it and he knows his delivery. So it can work. It just does take some work on that athlete to do, especially if they develop a bad habit. It's going to take a little longer for them. Anything else you want to add, Rob?
No, I think we covered everything. I know there's a few questions now, so we got a few minutes, I think, to maybe tackle some of those.
Yes, thank you so much. There are more than a few questions, so I guess we can get right into them. And then, as with before, if you are able to answer some offline and we can get the responses back to the attendees, that would be much appreciated. So the first one, would it be safe to say that the power
She cut out, eh?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Would it be safe to say that the power from the tuck delivery comes from the calf muscle rather than from the thigh muscle?
I don't know if it's much different than the flat foot delivery. I think we saw a lot of pictures and examples. The hack setup and the takeaway from the hack is very similar. So I don't know if that's any different. You need some strong thighs when you're kicking out of the hack to generate power. I think it's more so with being lower, it's a little more aerodynamic, and having less surface area on your sliding foot is less drag as well. So that's gonna make you go faster down the sheet of ice, which in turn will make the rock go faster once you release it. So that's where the power comes from in my mind.
Okay. This you may have answered. Is the grip for a tucker start with the rock at 10 or 2 position? So I think you sort of may have covered that in the differences between different deliveries as well.
Yeah, so ideally, and that's what we teach is 10 and 2, just like a flat foot delivery. People who have a high tuck can do that. People like Jeff, who are sort of the conventional tuck, can also do that. There are the anomalies like BJ Neufeld or Matt Dunstone, who are a bit lower to the ice, and it's not as possible, it's not as physically possible for them to get their hand position to be 2 o'clock at the outturn. So the in-turn they can still do at 10 o'clock, but the outturn can be modified. So if you have an athlete who slides a bit lower, you can try different things. You can try and get them to be a bit more upright. Nothing wrong with that. You can also try to get them to change their outturn to start at a straighter angle and then release at a different release point, but trying to sync up the rotations with the rest of the team. That's very important.
Good. I noticed on the slide that I think the slide that this is being discussed here is a slide between Brad Gushu and who's the other athlete early on, that the rock position is in front of the eyes face is different. Is that normal? I think it was this was Jill asking.
Jill asking about if there's any differences where the rock is in relation to the head.
Rock position in front of the eyes. She said yes.
Jill said yes. I don't see a difference. I don't know, Rob. I would say it should be the same. It might be different. You know what? There could be with the right eye dominant.
Oh, this was the picture of Gushu and McEwen.
It could have been the angle that I was taking, the camera angle too of it too as well. It's relatively when I take pictures. The only difference is if an athlete is right eye dominant and right-handed, then they'll move that rock over more.
That's what she was saying. On Mike, it looks more middle, and on Brad, it was more off the right eye. So perhaps it's the eye dominance.
Yeah.
Okay. Has there been any scientific research done on the long-term physical effects of different slide methods, flat foot tuck? Sort of talked about that.
Yeah, I saw Glenn Pauly, I think, sent an article about it and kind of summarized. So according to the article that he sent, there might be some adverse effects on the knee as in relation to the flat foot delivery. But again, like Connie said, there you can get injured. Brad Gushu had a severe hip injury with his flat foot slide. So I think it's been a common refrain for many years about the tuck delivery is that it's bad for the knee and that we shouldn't teach it. But I think kind of what we, or at least what I would like to convey, is that flat foot also can cause issues. And if you have athletes who are, sliding with a hybrid slide, or in Manitoba and surrounding areas slide with a tuck slide, maybe weigh all the options, maybe tell the parents to read up on the article. And if they think that it will damage their child's knee, maybe then that's when you make the switch. But I wouldn't strictly go away from it based on that personally, but you can make your own inferences from that.
Sounds fair. When using a stabilizer, what is the position of the stabilizer, tuck or flat foot? Again, I think you showed differences there, but if you just wanted to comment on that quickly.
Do you want to take that, Connie, or you want me to?
Well, if using the stabilizer, I know that I see, for example, at the Briar, we saw Reed Cruther uses it as flat. And the only thing that I would, get away from, Reed has it open, so he opens his shoulder up. He actually, rather than keeping the crutch more parallel, straight ahead towards the target. So that would be definitely, I would keep that stabilizer more pointing towards a target. And I'll let Rob talk about the tuck.
Yeah, so we had a lot of the side angle pictures, and I think the main thing with a stabilizer, and you could also call I know Jason Gunlickson was very adamant about this, is that a corn broom is also a crutch or a stabilizer, or whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing, it's just smaller. That's what he would always say. So in some of the pictures that we saw, in an ideal tuck delivery, you want that broom pretty close to where the rock is, at least in relation to kind of laterally, right? It doesn't have to be butted up against it, but Kate Cameron has hers further away, but it's still kind of on the same line, and that's going to keep your shoulders square. So we had that one athlete who had his hand further back. When I put my hand further back, you can see my shoulders open up. So for a tuck delivery, you just want to make sure that the shoulders are square. And that means that the delivery device is close to in line with the rock, or just slightly behind.
Thank you. At what point does the rock move from under the armpit to under the eye?
In a stance position, I'm assuming?
Pardon?
I'm assuming this is in the stance position, because it's just a guide, being in the for the rock to be somewhere in front of your hack foot. So if it's going to move under your eye in the hack foot, I mean, that's fine too. I'm good with it, as long as it's going to stay along the line of delivery.
Sliding foot stays under the hip, no further back.
You're talking about the sliding foot of the tuck, then, under the hip, like locked in underneath the upper hip?
Yes,
upper thigh, actually upper thigh, groin area, no further back.
Cam, that's not what you were asking. If you want to put something in the chat, but I'm thinking it's the tuck.
Well, you know what? It's interesting, because the position with the tuck deliverer, the position of your sliding foot, like you look at Jock Goche and you see his knee is almost on the ice. And both Rob and I were talking about that before this presentation. We're looking at how come his knee is so close. I mean, he's got good form and everything like that. And we think it's because his sliding foot is a little too far underneath him. So it's in a position that actually, if he brought it up a little higher on his thigh or upper thigh area, I think that then he probably his knee wouldn't be down as low to the ice.
Okay. So it's a lot of the tweaking the nuances then, but you've given us a ton of information that we can definitely use when we get back on the ice with our athletes to help with whether they have the tuck delivery, the flat foot, or the hybrid, which I think a lot of kids are also doing right now. So thank you again so much for all the information. And we really appreciate you being with us today, and Connie as a co-host as well, all the work you've done for the symposium. I would just like to take a minute to announce the winner of our ASHM gift certificate for $100. It was jail officer.
Woo! Way to go, Julie! Manitoba, yeah.
Manitoba, there you go. Not an Ontario winner.
Not
Rose.
Ontario.
Winning too much. And Andrew, are we turning it over to you, or is Melissa going to put up the questions now?
I think Melissa's turning it over to me, and then she'll put up the questions. So if everybody could stay on the line, please. We just have some more housekeeping. My house isn't getting any cleaner, it appears. Tomorrow, if you would please make sure that you're on time for the opening remarks, because if we don't use the full time for the opening remarks, we'll go right into the presentation with Helen Radford. So please make sure that you're on time. Now, Melissa, please, we have some polls for you to answer for us, please. Some questions. Not Melissa, everybody else. You're on mute, Melissa.
Sorry, here's the first one. Let me know if you get this.
Will you be joining us this evening for some entertainment? It's only about an hour long. You have some time now to get some supper or dinner or whatever. And then will you be joining us?
Hosts and panelists can't vote, so we can't come.
No, you have to come. You don't have a choice. We got some answers, Melissa?
Oh, you guys can't see them? I apologize.
No, we can't.
Yes, we do. We have 85% of the people voted, and it's I don't know why you can't see it, but I'm not telling you the answers.
Okay. All right. Can we move to the next one then?
Sure.
Please.
There are prizes available if that entices people.
Yes.
Okay, well, then we'll wait for there's just a few more people to vote, then I'm gonna wait.
Okay. You don't have to be present to get for your prize for the scavenger hunt questions. If you're a prize winner, you don't have to be present tonight. You can be, it would be fun.
Okay, I'm gonna end that one.
Okay.
And, oh, sorry, I can share the results. Do you want me to share results?
Sure.
Do we need to, or?
No, we don't need to.
No, we don't need to.
We'll stay on the line for a minute after.
Okay, here is the next one.
Okay.
I will allow panelists to vote this time. I guess I didn't know I could do that.
Which sessions are you going to attend between session 9 or session 10? Purposeful practices is session 9. Session 10 is how to teach strategy and tactics. And then between session 11 and 12, preparing for competition and recruitment. Which of those are you planning on attending, please?
Okay, we've got a little ways to go here, so just be patient while everyone does that.
If you indicate that you're attending a session and then you change your mind overnight or whatever, then we'll move you into the session you were supposed to go into. No, I'm kidding. You can change your mind.
Okay, we're at about 77% so far here. Just a bit
Yeah,
longer.
Nobody can leave until they vote. Oh, I guess I should vote too, right?
I'll just give you an idea. We're at 85%.
Okay.
Just kind of, I sent you guys a screenshot of it.
Am I doing anything during those two sessions?
Yeah, you're probably.
I'm a backup.
Oh, you're in. Yeah, you're in my sessions. This one. Okay, yeah. We are at 90%. Is that good?
Sure.
Haven't voted?
Yep.
Give you 10 more seconds. Okay, I think we'll end the polling there. And
okay. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been a very full day. lot of information to absorb, but I'm very grateful that you stuck with us and that we did end up with the participation that we did. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me. You can ask them tomorrow morning in the chat, the Q&A. So I'm looking forward to tonight's competition. It'll be friendly, fun, and real, not just virtual. Grab some refreshments and come on back when you're ready. Be back at, oh, what time does it start?
5
Starts
o'clock my time.
5 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Mountain, 7 o'clock Central, and 8 o'clock Eastern. And I'm not going as far as the Maritimes because I get confused. 9 o'clock and 9:30.
9:30, Leslie. Yeah, Leslie. Yeah.
Okay, thank
we good?
you. Yep. We'll stay on though, just to have a look at the results. Can we, for a few minutes?
You bet.
Okay.